Hello, everyone. Welcome in the Believe It Ole Miss podcast. Brad Logan on alongside Sam Hutchins, who does a great job covering the Ole Miss athletic program. Sam, pre-production meeting with you and I. Ole Miss will have full coverage from the men's tournament and the women's tournament. I know you're excited about heading over to Atlanta to watch the Ole Miss men's basketball team in the Sweet 16, a place that's only been to. This will be the third time in program history.
That's right. And you know this, Brad, because we're friends. But I just hopped on the beat in September, and I hadn't gotten to cover a March Madness before. So I was really excited about going to Milwaukee and doing all that. And especially because I had my brother there, which I think we'll get into a little bit. But yeah, so I didn't quite expect to be going to another city in another week. But here we are. I'll leave for Atlanta Thursday morning. Depending on when the fine folks are listening to this, they may be on the road to Atlanta as well, or Spokane. So, yeah, plenty of coverage from the men's team and the women's team coming out of the Ledger.
Before we get to the Ole Miss and men's and women's basketball teams, I would like to ask you about what it was like with your brother on the beat, of course, of the Iowa State. Ben, did I say that?
That's right. That's right.
Ben covers Iowa State. Is he with Gannett as well?
He's actually with Lee, so kind of a competitor chain a little bit, which is odd because he's at the end of the day he's still one of my confidants, or is it
Yeah.
confidants? I'm not, but regardless, Ben's a guy I lean on, so technically a competitor, but yeah, brother first.
Well, as you learned very quickly, you and Ben were a part of the television broadcast whenever they profiled you guys. You also had an opportunity to be on Paul Feinbaum's show. I thought that was really cool. You've got a great piece right now that I posted that you wrote about working with your brother and kind of growing up. I'd like to start there. Um, Obviously, twins. I mean, we saw that by looking at you. I knew you had a twin, but didn't realize you guys are just identical and really look a whole lot alike. I'd love to go back when you guys were growing up. Did one of you kind of get the sports writing bug more than the other? Did you want to get into journalism? Kind of walk me through you guys growing up as kids.
Yeah, I joke, or I guess I don't, it's not quite a joke, but we always realized we liked sports. And then when we were growing up, we kind of looked back and said, wait, we liked writing as well. We just didn't know it at the time because when you're a 12-year-old kid and you love reading and you love just like writing songs and whatever with your brothers messing around, you don't know about all that. But looking back, it makes sense. And but no, we were very much together in that, and we grew up in a sports family. And I think I told Feinbaum this, Brad, like it kind of sounds a little preposterous. I totally get it to do the exact same thing as your identical twin, but I guess Ben and I always grown up, it's almost been more preposterous to do something different just because we have grown up and liked the same things our whole life and have grown together in that regard. So
I know
it,
you
it
guys.
sounds bizarre, but
Yeah.
it's that's how our life's played out in everything. We've done everything together until September.
And growing up in Oklahoma, correct?
That's right.
So take me through high school. I know, obviously, I know it was cool going to high school with your brother, but tell me a little bit about did you do anything in high school in regards to any type of journalism to get you ready for your career?
Not in an official capacity, and we were homeschooled, so it was a little different in that regard. Maybe that's where I started being so close with Ben and my younger brother David. Is we were homeschooled all the way from kindergarten through high school graduation. And I think we skipped kindergarten, so that's why. Please don't ask me what the name of any colors are. I can't tell you. But we did first grade through high school graduation all together. But looking back on it, Brad, I kind of realized we were doing some things that helped. Our dad was a sports writer in college, and now he's in sales. He didn't really pursue it past college, but he had a blast doing that at Wichita State. And what he told Ben and I and our little brother is he just taught us the value of shaking hands and getting to form genuine relationships with someone. And even if that's 30 seconds in the hotel lobby of asking someone what they're from and saying, oh, you went to throw out a random college, NC State or something. And then you could say, oh, I'm a Denver Broncos fan. He went there and now Russell Wilson's there. Whatever. There's so many ways you can make connections through sports and it helps you just get to know people. So I've grown up shaking hands and introducing myself. And I just love the intersection of this business that we're in, where getting to know people and tell stories is through sports is our everyday life.
You had a chance to cover pretty much all the sports at Ole Miss. Very briefly, looking back over football season and then now fast forward into men's basketball, women's basketball. As you know, Ole Miss men's and women's making the NCAA tournament for the first time in program history, both in the same year. And then baseball is doing really well. Really good time to be an Ole Miss fan, I think. Ole Miss fans will tell you that. Is there anything that's kind of jumped out at you that maybe you've had some things that you remember covering this Ole Miss team throughout your time here, dating back to the football season?
Yeah, my first week was the second football game of the year. So I jumped right in, and I'm a Big 12 guy. I went to Oklahoma State and have covered Mike Gundy for 4 years when I was in school. But to get to see the SEC for the first time, I'm not afraid to say that from what I've seen, it truly, I think it does mean a little more down here. And so to get to see places like at Death Valley at night, what an insane first experience at Death Valley that was this year for me and probably some of the people listening, to watch an overtime night game like that. Going to at Gainesville was such a cool experience in the football season, and that environment really impressed me. So the football really jumped off the page, and then I guess what surprised me since then is now just from what you've learned about the recent history of the program, maybe you expect a little bit of a drop off, right? It's a football town, and but now it's the crazy part is basketball's picking up, and baseball is so good this year so far in a way that it wasn't expected to be at the start of the season. So it's been cool to see kind of all the sports peaking right when I get into town. It's a little crazy. I've had some people joke with me like, "Hey, maybe you're the bit of good luck around here." But I can't take credit for that. But I enjoy getting to watch all these fascinating stories.
You've watched a lot of college basketball and not necessarily through the lens covering Ole Miss or as a fan of Ole Miss, obviously, but you've watched a lot of college basketball. What are your overall thoughts on this Ole Miss men's basketball team? I think six scores averaging over 10 points a game. They distribute the basketball really well. They have gotten a little bit better rebounding the basketball. That's been kind of their nemesis over the last couple of weeks. What are your overall thoughts on this Ole Miss basketball team?
Yeah, and you're right, Brad. I've had to learn a lot as I come in just because the familiarity. But I'll say I did know I grew up like 10 minutes from where Sean Padula's from, so I'd heard that name for the longest time in Oklahoma. And I think he's a great person for this offense that is just so well rounded. And the fun thing about this team, Brad, is you can go to a game at the SJB Pavilion and not know if it's going to be Sean Padula or Dre Davis or Malik Dia or Jamin Brakefield that's going to lead this team. The productions come from anywhere and everywhere, and now it's coming a little bit from everyone all at once in the NCAA tournament. So from year one, and I've seen and this whole basketball team has a new feel since Beard came in. So it's kind of an interesting time to jump in, and I think this team is really kind of embodied Chris Beard a little bit and started to play good defense. And the way Beard breaks up this March Madness tournament as not some pipe dream, but he says, hey, all it is three, four-team tournaments. And I just think that's a fascinating way to break it up and make it feel manageable. And here Ole Miss is on a run trying to win in the second four-team tournament.
And you look back at the game, I know you were in Starkville when they lost in OT, they being Ole Miss, and Chris Beard was like, they got the best of us in OT. He was right here. And then Ole Miss comes home a couple of weeks later and beats Tennessee, and Chris Beard's like, yeah, we played really well. He was right here. And one thing that's been interesting, and I'd love your thoughts on this because I know you followed Chris Beard while he was at Texas, and then of course Texas Tech in your neck of the woods in the Big 12. One thing that always jumped out to me about Chris Beard is he talked about the regular season being an 18-round fight, never getting too high, never getting too low, and that's definitely played into I guess you could say, the mantra of this team. They're taking on the personality of Chris Beard. Real quick, I mean, we could talk all day about Beard and about the way that he's approached the season, about how the way he's approached the NCAA tournament. What are your overall thoughts on Chris Beard as a head coach, dating back to when he was at Texas Tech and then, of course, at Texas for the short period, and now he's at Ole Miss? I think if you describe him on the floor, he's a winner, and he's definitely proven to be a winner in Oxford.
I'll tell you a little bit of a story, because it truly I think explains Beard to me a little bit. It's on his Wikipedia page. He coached for 6 months in the ABA, and not the ABA that I knew, or maybe you're thinking of now, Brad. But the ABA, this ABA was not the one that merged with the NBA in like the 60s or the 70s. The he that league stayed around or changed a little bit, and after Beard lost his job at Texas Tech as an assistant coach, in 2010 era, he coached for 6 months on a semi-pro team in Myrtle Beach, and he took that and he got that team to 29-0 in the blink. They were not a team, and then he came in to be the first ever head coach and had them 29-0, and eventually, they ended up losing in a two-game ABA finals series. But I tell that story to say Beard has shown an ability to build any program. He's taken Angelo, the Texas team, to the NCAA tournament. He's taken Texas Tech to the NCAA tournament. Go all the way back to his days in JUCO and stuff. He takes those teams to the tournament. So that was the thing about Beard, right? It was he was a slam dunk hire with off the court issues, and I thought the school that was gonna hire him was gonna be in for great success, and Ole Miss was the team to take that plunge. And for better or for worse on the PR side, but I think Beard's behaved himself really well up here, getting ingratiated into the community, and the people love him, and the people love what he's brought on the court.
Sam, you're as good a person to ask as anybody coming in from Big 12 territory, growing up there, and of course covering Oklahoma State and the Big 12. I guess just a general question: what makes Chris Beard so good?
I asked those Warriors that because they played with him semi-pro ball for 6 months, and the whole strategy then was, hey, I want you to play with me for half a season, and I can get you onto a better team in Europe or something. And what they told me is they said, man, Chris Beard, he forms genuine relationships really fast, and they gave examples of Beard paying guys out of pocket, Beard, just getting them through life. And they said Beard was going broke on his own, but he would pay for gas money. He would do this, he would do that just to make our lives, a little more manageable. And then years later, they're telling me, oh, yeah, and Beard's invited me, a semi-pro guy who played for him for 3 months, down to Oxford to watch a game of the Rebels this year. So that's what sticks out to me is, yes, he's a defensive guy. Yes, he's from the night tree, and he gets those guys playing really hard. But I guess Beard has told me the only way you can get guys to play hard, which is his strength, is to have a real relationship with them. Because if they hate you or don't respect you or even just have some respect for you, they won't play hard for you. But I think what Beard has been done, and it's his recipe at every stop, is to get in and get everyone to buy in immediately to what he's doing. And that's how you get a team that's so great in like the turnover differential, all these hustle stats that and the good defense that Beard is known for.
I know you saw the video whenever the CBS announcer asked Tom Izzo his thoughts on Ole Miss. He kind of stepped back and said, "Wow, Ole Miss beat Iowa State." You kind of see it on his face. What are you kind of looking at with this Michigan State team? What does Ole Miss have to prepare for? And we've all grew up watching Tom Izzo, the guy that always wins in the NCAA tournament. But it just feels like this Ole Miss team, under the direction of Chris Beard, they just don't care about all of that. What are you kind of thinking Ole Miss is going to have before them when it faces Michigan State on Friday night?
Yeah, I think you're right, Brad. And I'll tell you what, I have a guess as to what was going through Izzo's mind when he heard that is they played in 2019 in the NCAA tournament. Izzo's Spartans met Beard's Texas Tech Red Raiders in the Final Four. And I don't have it pulled up right now, but I had it pulled up earlier, so I'm pretty confident in these stats. I'm kind of a forgetful person, but I think it was 61-51. Texas Tech won, and I believe the 51 points were the least Michigan State has scored all season. So granted, turnovers, everything in college basketball. That was what, 6 years ago now. But I bet that was going through Izzo's mind a little bit is, man, I've met Beard in the tournament before and it didn't go well. As far as this matchup goes, the Spartans are really good defending the 3-point line, which I'll be watching out for because it hasn't been a strength all year for this team. But in the tournament, 3-point shooting has been off the charts. They're 49% right now. So that'll be one thing I'm watching for sure.
It feels like, Sam, I'd like your thoughts on this. It feels like this is a free shot for Ole Miss. I don't think I'm saying anything that Ole Miss fans would not disagree with. This is not one of the better jobs in the SEC at Ole Miss. Historically, a program that's only been to the Sweet 16, like we mentioned ago, a couple of times in history. This will be the third time. So, is it fair to say this is a free shot for Ole Miss?
Yeah, I mean, I've lived in Oxford for 5 months, so however much I'm qualified to speak for the fans and what I've felt from the fan base, but it does feel like you're playing a little bit with house money. You're a sixth seed. You're not, like a sixth seed like KU was a seventh seed where they have the pressure. You're a sixth seed that's coming in without any pressure. You're just one of a bevy of teams in your conference, and you're trying to make a little noise. And that's what it feels like to me that Ole Miss is playing free and they're playing with house money. I think Oxford, I mean, they hadn't been to a Sweet 16 since before I was born, Brad. So to just do that is pretty impressive. So to go anything further than that, while the people internally in the building, they may have been setting that expectation, at least on the outside expectations, Ole Miss has surpassed what they needed to do in Beard in year two.
Let's talk just a minute just about the Ole Miss women's basketball program. Coach Joe's done a really good job this year. Did not have an opportunity to host. That host site went to Maryland. Ole Miss finished number 17 in the quote unquote NCAA poll that would allow Ole Miss to host. There was some disappointment there, I know, but I know the Clarion Ledger will be on site in Spokane, Washington. I know you're headed over to Atlanta. Your overall thoughts on the job that Coach Joe did? It feels like if they could have beaten Texas A&M earlier this year, once they beat LSU on the road, they pretty much secured a hosting spot. That may have been one of the reasons they did not get a chance to host. But once again, they go on the road. They win the Baylor Regional, and they're headed to Spokane for the Sweet 16.
That's right. I think the story of this Ole Miss team this year, the women's team, and they're a dang good team, and they probably should have been a host in hindsight. They beat Baylor. I know that the Rebels enjoyed beating Baylor in Waco and kind of proving to the committee that they're worthy of a Sweet 16 bid. But the story of this team is, man, they're just a few plays from being viewed as one of the best teams in the tournament, right? Like the first game of the year in Paris, they lost in the last seconds. They had Texas beat late and lost to Texas, and now the Longhorns are a one seed in the NCAA tournament. So that's kind of the narrative setting up there in Washington is the Rebels are going up against UCLA, but they've taken down or they've been very close to taking down these top level teams all year. So they finally get one more chance, a do or die chance to do just that. So that would be interesting to see if they can get a little last second redemption and really make a run in this tournament. Those one seeds are always so tough, but it's a chance to get a little redemption.
Yeah, Coach Joe, if you'll remember, as you know well, Sam, that they had an opportunity to beat Texas at home and just kind of faltered there late. Had Carolina played with Coach Don Studley for a while, beat LSU on the road. But I think one game that really jumped out to me is we saw Mississippi State had to go on the road and face USC, and which was pure domination by the Trojans. Ole Miss played with USC earlier in the year, and I think would eventually fall by a couple of points. So, and that was with the talented freshman Juju, whatever her
Yeah,
last
Juju Watkins. Yeah.
like. And so we saw that she tore her ACL last night. So definitely something to watch. And Coach Joe, and you look at this overall athletic program, and we'll briefly bring up baseball. They've done a really good job sweeping Missouri over the weekend. I think they're 4-2 in the conference. Had a really big win last night over Memphis. Coach Mike Bianco, the team's playing well. But I think, to kind of finish up here, Sam, if you're Keith Carter, you have to feel Keith Carter, obviously the director of athletics at Ole Miss, you have to feel pretty good about your major sports in football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, and softball. If you want to throw the Diamond softball team in there as well, they've had a pretty good season. It feels like if you're Keith Carter, Sam, it's a really good time to be the athletic director at Ole Miss.
Absolutely. That's it. All I've seen since September is success. And, was football the ultimate success? Were people still disappointed? No and yes. But by and large, in terms of trying to compete in the conference with the most lucrative teams and the toughest standard to live up to, the SEC, Ole Miss is thriving in sports right now. And that's impressive what I think will be very interesting is when revenue sharing comes in, and maybe some teams devote a little more to this sport and that sport, and where the lines are drawn and what do you want to compete in the most. But for now, yeah, with football obviously being in the driver's seat, this Ole Miss train in Oxford is just really rolling along right now in all sports.
Ole Miss has an opportunity to do something it hasn't done ever in program history. That's make the Elite Eight, and I believe the bracket sets up to where they would face Auburn, the winner of Auburn and
Michigan, that's right.
Michigan. So
And yeah, being 0-3 against Auburn that's one of those things, Brad, is it's like, do you want to play Auburn just because beating a team 4 times in a year is so hard, or do you just would rather play Michigan? I don't even know.
yeah, I think at that point you talk about rolling the dice and just be happy about making as far as you do. I think more than anything, you look at the conference. If Ole Miss can beat Michigan State, then you start thinking about how many teams in the SEC will be in the Elite Eight. I mean,
Hmm.
there's an opportunity. The only game they're going head to head is Tennessee and Kentucky and Indianapolis. The rest of the SEC has an opportunity to make the Elite Eight. You could have 6 of the 8 teams. That is just incredible.
I think this conference has proven that it's the best conference that maybe we've ever seen in basketball, right? Because there was a lot of argument that it was in the early part of the season, and then everyone said, well, we'll see in the tournament. And it wasn't a complete sweeping success. But even OU, like OU played UConn close, who played Florida close. Missouri got upset, but by and large, SEC teams have showed up and showed out, and at least it proved, given another data point to the argument that this is possibly the greatest basketball single season from a conference that we've seen, and especially if you can get a national champion out of it, if Florida wins, or if you can get Auburn to win it all, or something like that, I think that would really kind of cement it. But yeah, where there was a big chance for the SEC to fall flat on its face, that did not happen in the first 2 rounds.
He's Sam Hutchins. He'll have full coverage from the Ole Miss Rebels in the Sweet 16 from Phillips Arena over in Atlanta. Tip-off is Friday night at 6:09 Central. And Sam, thanks very much for joining us. Be sure and follow Sam on Twitter/X and also follow the Clarion Ledger. Sam, thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Brad, I said a stat earlier. I don't want to make people feel bad about them not reaching the Sweet 16 since before I was born. It was just a couple months. So it's true, but I was born in November and they made the Sweet 16 earlier that year. So for the folks at home wondering, I'm 23 years old. I don't want everyone to leave this feeling old.
Thanks, Sam. We appreciate it. Safe travels to Atlanta.
See you, Brad.